Hello, good afternoon, readers. It's Tilly here from Tilly's Shelf,
And Rog from Sally Danling about the books.
and we're here for another review of a piece of new fiction. So, for our joint reading challenge this year, we're reading a work of 2020's fiction every month for the year, which is new for me because I don't often read books that are that recent. And
Mhm.
for this month, for April, we have decided to read Western Lane by Chetna Maroo. So
And
this came. Oh, carry on.
go on.
This came out in 2023, and it was shortlisted for the Booker Prize last year. And it's a story about.
I'm going to interrupt you to say, and it's currently longlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction 2024. So,
Oh, wonderful! So we're,
yeah,
we're yet to find out how it does on that, and I think it deserves to do reasonably well. Yeah. Yes. So it's a book about bereavement, loss, bit of coming of age, family, that kind of thing.
and
It's a
squash.
novella and squash. Yes. We don't mean the kind of pumpkin thing. We don't mean like
The
squeezing,
the soft drink.
soft drink. No, we mean the sport. And the descriptions of squash in this book are really quite vivid. And I know nothing at all about squash, but I felt very quickly quite immersed in the world of that.
Yeah. Before we go any further, I just want to say that I'm still in a sling with the old broken arm, broken shoulder. So I'm getting to use my
Beautiful book cushion.
my book cushion to rest my arm on, which is nice. So the fact that this book it is people hear that it's about a family that plays squash
Yes.
has, I think, put off. I've heard people, responding to the Booker list and now the Women's Prize for Fiction long list, sort of saying, "Why would I want to read a book that's about squash? That's a real turn off for me." And how
Okay.
wrong? How wrong?
Yeah. When in contrast, the last month we did Happiness Falls by Angie Kim, and your summary of that immediately made me think that sounds fantastic. I really want to read that. Your summary for this was it's about bereavement and squash, and I was like, okay, I'm going to trust Roz on this one because she normally knows what she's talking about. But yeah, I wasn't immediately drawn to the concept, but it really works. It's really good.
Yeah.
Um,
Uh,
what
uh,
I'd
uh,
say what
sorry.
I'd say is that the squash is not the book is not about squash.
No.
The book is about what you do to process your bereavement, and that's different for so many people. But having a focus, having a passion to pour yourself into, is can be one way to sort of move past that moment in your life, and that's the squash is sometimes a support, sometimes almost an obsession, and the way that impacts on their family dynamics. It's about the emotional side. It's not about the sport. It's about the emotions.
Yeah, it could have been it could have been tennis, it could have been playing the violin, it could have been anything really. It just happens to be squash. But I think the fact that it it works as a particular choice because there's something about the intent. Well, I gather from reading this, the intensity of a squash match and the training for it, and it like because it happens in quite a small enclosed court. It's very different from if, say, it had been about, I don't know, climbing up mountains. That
Yeah,
the
that's exactly the
physical and
comparison that I was going to
emotional,
draw.
yeah, atmosphere is different. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and that's used very effectively in the story. That kind of enclosed space and the pressures of being inside that kind of that box almost,
yeah,
um,
yeah. But as you
particularly in
say,
final, I think.
yeah, essentially, it's a book about uh, being a small, close family that uh, where the one of the parents dies prematurely, whilst the children are still young. And you know that's what it's really about, isn't it? You know, and how the three girls who were 11, 13 and 15 and their father, how they live beyond Mars death. Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
And it is narrated or you know the central voice is Gopi, who's the 11-year-old.
11-year-old.
And if there was a reason why I would not have picked up this book, it wouldn't have been because of the squash. It would have been because it's a child narrator, and I rarely have a successful experience with that. And that's why I really rate this book, I suppose, because it absolutely worked. I was convinced by that central protagonist's voice to utterly, yeah, and her perspective, and it gave it a very particular flavour, because there's lots of things that she doesn't yet know or understand.
Mm.
But the way Maroo writes it, the way she puts in um, things you can observe, you know, scenes, interactions, conversations, like you, the adult reader, can observe those things and see you get to put it together. And I like that. I like when I have to do a bit of the work to make a book gel. Yeah.
Yeah, and I felt that it was handled really well. Yeah, the handling of her kind of aging through sort of I think it covers like a year to a year and a half after losing their mum, um, how she changes through that time, and kind of like that kind of being on the cusp of of puberty, becoming a teenager, starting to have new sensations and emotions, regardless of having also just had a bereavement. I felt that Maru did that in a very sensitive way that wasn't like an over the top thing. It was just you could see that that was how she was growing up.
Yeah, yeah. So another thing that I think the book has, which I appreciated, you know, added to my engagement with it, is it's about us. I suppose it reflects a sort of second generation migrant experience. So, you know, the parents are sort of Gujarati speaking and have, you know, moved to the UK, um, and whereas the children are, you know, grown up in England, and the dynamics that creates, and particularly about language and their relationship with their mother, because their parents choose, and I know this is a sort of common experience, their parents choose to speak to them in English, although they also go to Gujarati school to sort of learn Gujarati, but they and their mother's English is not as fluent as theirs and their father's. So there's their relationship with their mother is coloured through that. You know, like there's this lovely line about how they always had to listen to her more carefully, whether
Yeah,
she was speaking in English or Gujarati, because of that sort of, you know, their Gujarati wasn't perfect, her English wasn't perfect. Fascinating that, you know, what does that mean in a family
yeah,
relationship?
and also how it affects sort of memories as well, because I remember at a later point in the book somebody says a phrase, and immediately all of them, they all know that they're all thinking of their mum, because it's one of the few phrases that she had like fully assimilated and was saying easily in English, so
Yeah,
it brings that memory of her really physically into the room.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So
I
what else
like
did
that aspect as well in terms of the second generation kind of dynamics, in terms of the way that the community interacted and the way that their family interacted around them, like kind of the expectations of family behavior following a bereavement that were brought from one generation, kind of not exactly conflicting, but contrasting with the their experience in their current situation.
Yeah.
That was interesting.
The,
Yeah.
the relationship with Dad's brother, their Uncle
Mhm.
Pavan, and their Auntie Ranjan, that was a really important part of the story. That and it was really, again, I keep saying it was interesting. I mean, like if people that watch this channel will know that's my high praise. If I say a book is interesting, if it's engaged my mind and my emotions, that's a big win. I thought it was really subtle, like the interrelationships between the adults as observed by the children, and how Uncle Pavan is careful and considerate with Auntie Ranjan, and how she's trying to sort of perhaps enforce a kind of a set of expectations or a code in a very loving way, but that generates a degree of conflict. And but how they all deal with that is so yeah, it's very
Yeah,
rich.
like it's important to her to maintain maybe some of the traditions that she grew up with that she's then been pulled away from, and how they're all quite sensitive in responding to how
Yeah,
she needs things to be, but how she's kind of then trying to find external justifications for that, or like of kind of referring back to, well, your mother would have, what about your mother? And they're thinking, well, our mother wasn't, that's not how our mother was.
yeah,
Yes, I liked the way that dynamic is.
yeah, yeah. It's
I
all
also
very well done.
kind of another argument for the squash, although there's various different sports that you could do this with. Um, I liked how a lot of the talk about squash, the dad and the Uncle Pavan, and other people in the community who knew about squash would be talking about um, fantastic squash players from history from their community, and saying, this, look at this guy, look how beautifully he did it, and kind of using them as positive role models in both for the sport and for their
Yeah,
kind of like shared history.
yeah.
So I thought that was, yeah,
And there was a very delicate thing around the fact that they are that a lot of the top squash players that they were following and fascinated by were Pakistani and
yeah,
Muslim, and they're not. So that thing of like a shared sort of Indian subcontinent pride and history, but also there's a conflict there.
yeah,
So it
yeah. They're
was
subtle.
very,
Yeah,
yeah. So all of, as I say, for a short novella, I felt it packed in an awful lot of
there's so
subtleties.
much.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's
yeah,
so much in there.
yeah. Bearing in mind it's a short novella, we probably shouldn't be making an incredibly long video about it. Anything
That's
else that
fair
you
enough.
want? Anything else you want to say before we sign off? Anything we've missed?
Um, I liked. I felt that the book moved me along quite quickly. The pacing was good. I think you've said that you've heard a bit of criticism about it, that maybe the some people didn't perceive the emotions as strongly, but I think that was because it was done subtly. It was done in just like moments of comments, or the feeling that she has that she can't quite remember her mother's face, and little bits that build up over time to show you the extent of the loss that they're feeling. I didn't agree with that as a criticism.
The father is having a complete, you know, breakdown,
Yeah,
really, and
yeah,
I don't understand the criticism that says it doesn't, deal with the
yeah.
emotions.
It's not melodramatic.
No,
So
no.
if you're looking for melodrama,
But
it's yeah,
but the emotions
it's
are
effective.
absolutely there, depicted in a yeah in a way that you can see. And the other criticism I've had is that people would have liked more about the other two sisters.
Yeah,
And I always appreciate a short book that does good things. Are small packages are like get a big thumbs up from me. But I don't know, what do you think about that?
I felt that the oldest sister Mona was quite well portrayed. She was quite well rounded. You could see kind of the challenges that she was going through, and kind of having to take on some of the family's kind of burdens at a very young age. The middle sister Kush, I sometimes felt like she wasn't completely very clearly defined, but for me that was a reasonable trade-off for having the kind of the elegant, short, swift story, rather than I didn't feel like I needed extra time dwelling on everything from just review.
Yeah. So, in summary, this is a strong recommendation from me for anyone who hasn't already read it. Always interested to hear other views, and I know not everyone's loved it, and now because it's on the Women's Prize fiction long list at the moment, I know more people are reading it again, and people's reactions vary. But I would say, don't DNF it early on. Give yourself time to see the
To get
subtleties.
into it and get into the characters. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. What would you say?
Yeah, the same. And it's such a short book as well. Like, if you're thinking, should I read it? You might as well. You just might as well, because you could get the emotional depth that you can get from such a short book it's
Yeah. And now we need to choose a book for May, which we haven't done yet. So we'll
yeah,
go and put our thinking caps on.
yeah. And if anybody has any recommendations, I'm sure they will
Yeah.
let us
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. There we go. Bye.
Thanks.